very famous member of our Sampradaya. He was the guru of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. On the instruction of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he took initiation from him. And Gour Kishor Das Babaji himself originally came from Bangladesh. And at an early age, he was first married, but his wife died. Then it appears he was already a Vaishnava, because shortly after that, he renounced everything and went to Vrindavan and took shelter of Bhagavat Das Babaji, who was a disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. And then he lived in Vrindavan for about 30 years, absorbed in chanting and serving the Vaishnavas there, and doing service for Radha and Krishna. So he spent a lot of his time there. It is said he was also illiterate. He didn't know how to read or write. However, he was very learned. Somehow or other, he gained a lot of knowledge, I suppose by hearing from others who were knowledgeable. So even though he didn't have knowledge of reading and writing, somehow or other he was able to attain vast knowledge as well. So therefore he associated with the other devotees there and was also absorbed in hearing from them. At a certain point, he came to Navadvip. At that time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was there. And later on, we could say Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also. So he became great friends with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who would often give lectures on Srimad Bhagavatam, and Gour Kishor would listen to those discourses. So they became quite close to each other. And at the same time, he continued his very renounced life. He was not attached to anything, even clothing or whatever, or food. At the same time, he was very strict, so he would not take food cooked by impure people and prefer to make his own, beg some food and cook it up himself and then offer that and then take that. He was very concerned about materialistic people and refused to associate with them. Once some royalty of some king invited him to his palace because he had heard about him. He was very famous as a renounced person, but Gour Kishor Das Babaji refused to go. He said he would get contaminated by such surroundings, but he invited the king to give up everything and come and live in Navadvip with him in a little hut. He said, that way you could associate with me if you really want my association. So he avoided materialists. One household couple tried to invite him to their place, but he was very reluctant to go. But they were very respectable devotees, so then finally he agreed, but he said, I'll only live in the latrine. So they made a special latrine for him. And there he was chanting his rounds and doing whatever, serving from that place. So he was not attached to any particular place. He was not attached to any persons, especially people who had money or whatever. Rather, he was very detached from everything in this material world. And on the contrary, he was completely absorbed in the pastimes of Krishna and Gauranga. So because of that, extreme renunciation and great attachment to the Lord, he became quite famous in Navadvip area. And he was particularly, he preached particularly about chanting of the name of the Lord, Harinam. he was not so much interested in having people study. He says you cannot gain knowledge by that means. He says actually the revelation will come through the process of chanting itself. So he emphasized the chanting process above all else. And he's also said that to attain your Swarup, whatever spiritual form you have in the spiritual world, the main method is not through the process of Siddha Pranali, in which the Guru gives you a certain form, but rather through the process of chanting. So your form is revealed through the chanting process rather than anything else. So in this way, he showed his great reliance on the holy name as the revealer of all scriptures and your form in the spiritual world. So he was, we can say, very qualified as a Vaishnava. And for that reason, Bhaktivinoda Thakur instructed Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to take Diksha from him, and eventually that took place. It is not known if Gour Kishor initiated anyone else. At least no one claims, I don't think anyone claims that. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was the only person who took initiation from him, because he was not interested in having followers or whatever, what to speak of, wealth or anything else. So that was not a priority on his list. So in this way, he passed his time in the Dham of Navadvip, remembering the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So because of his outstanding qualities, he was recognized by the people at that time as an exalted devotee, and no one had anything negative to say about him. At the same time, from conventional point of view, he was not very conventional. He was quite unconventional. He did not act in a normal way. He did not act socially with other persons. He tried to avoid people. He did not dress properly according to etiquette or whatever. Sometimes he had no clothing at all. So in this way, on one level, he was completely beyond society. But this, we can understand, is also a symptom of an elevated devotee. He has no social concerns at all. And so therefore, it's not a matter that he wants to break the rules of society, but simply he's transcended thinking of those things, and therefore they're like impediments to him to be brought down to if he's brought down to a lower level of consciousness. So in other words, he was very, very elevated in his consciousness, and therefore he showed these very extreme levels of conduct, which we can also see are mentioned in the scriptures themselves. We find many of these descriptions in the scriptures, let's say, of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, where he talks about the people in bhava and prema, where they completely oblivious to the material world and all obligations in the material world, and completely absorbed in the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. So, of course, he was a Babaji, which means very renounced, and not much interested in material activities or temples or anything. His disciple, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, was the opposite, because he had to fulfill the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread the movement of Lord Chaitanya everywhere. So therefore he established an institution. Gour Kishor Das Babaji was not interested in institution at all. He was just interested in his own relationship with the Lord. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to establish an institution to spread the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we see that even though he was a disciple, he had quite a different approach to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the preaching movement. So therefore we see that even within the same sampradaya and the same line, there can be different intentions or different strategies, though ultimately you say the intention is the same, to please the Lord, but the method in which we please the Lord may be different. So in the case of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the method was to actively preach in this world and spread Krishna consciousness. So therefore, the pleasure of the Lord took a different form. Okay.